The Possession of Emily Johnson, A Tale of Haunting and Horror. Chapter 1, The New Neighbors. The small town of Millville was known for its friendly community and quaint charm. But when the Johnson family moved into the old Victorian house on Elm Street, the entire town was abuzz with excitement and curiosity. The Johnsons were an odd family, to say the least. Mr. Johnson was a recluse who rarely left the house, while Mrs. Johnson was always seen with a nervous look on her face, as if she was constantly on edge. But it was their daughter, Emily, who really caught the attention of the townsfolk. Emily was a strange child, with jet black hair and pale skin that made her look like a porcelain doll. She never spoke to anyone, and when people tried to approach her, she would simply stare at them with her cold, emotionless eyes. Despite her eerie demeanor, the children of Millville were fascinated by her. They would gather outside the Johnsons' house, whispering and giggling as they tried to catch a glimpse of the mysterious girl. One day, a group of boys decided to sneak into the Johnsons' backyard to get a closer look at Emily. But as they peered through the bushes, they saw something that chilled them to the bone. Emily was standing in the middle of the yard, staring up at the sky with an expression of pure joy on her face. But as they watched, her body began to contort and twist in unnatural ways, as if she was possessed by some malevolent force. The boys ran back to town, terrified by what they had seen. They told their parents, who dismissed it as a childish prank. But as more and more strange occurrences began to happen around the Johnsons' house, the town began to realize that something was terribly wrong with the Johnson family, and especially with Emily. Despite their fears, the townspeople were too polite to confront the Johnsons directly. They whispered and gossiped behind closed doors, but nobody had the courage to ask the family what was going on. And so, the mystery of Emily Johnson continued to haunt the town, filling its residents with a sense of unease and foreboding. They knew that something was coming, something that would change their peaceful town forever. But they didn't know what it was, or how to stop it. Chapter 2, The Disappearance. As the weeks went by, the strange occurrences around the Johnsons' house only grew more frequent and more disturbing. There were reports of strange noises coming from inside the house, like the sound of furniture being moved around in the dead of night. One morning, the Johnsons' mailbox was found ripped off its post and lying on the ground, as if it had been torn apart by some powerful force. And then, one day, Emily disappeared. The news spread quickly through the town, and soon a search party was organized to look for the missing girl. The Johnsons were questioned, but they refused to say anything, only staring at the ground with blank expressions on their faces. The search party combed through the woods and fields surrounding the Johnsons' house, but there was no sign of Emily. The townspeople grew increasingly worried, wondering what could have happened to the strange and eerie girl. But then, a week after her disappearance, a group of children playing in the woods stumbled upon something that made their blood run cold. It was Emily's body, lying in a clearing, her limbs twisted at unnatural angles. The town was thrown into chaos, as rumors and speculation ran rampant. Some whispered that the Johnsons were responsible, while others believed that Emily had been taken by some kind of supernatural force. The Johnsons remained silent throughout it all, their faces expressionless and unreadable. The police questioned them repeatedly, but they refused to give any information about what had happened to their daughter. As the days turned into weeks, the town slowly began to return to normal. But the memory of Emily Johnson and her mysterious and gruesome death lingered in the minds of the townspeople, haunting them with the knowledge that something evil lurked in their midst. Chapter 3, The Haunted House. After Emily's death, the Johnsons became even more reclusive, rarely leaving their house and keeping to themselves. But strange things continued to happen around their home, causing many to believe that it was haunted by the spirit of the dead girl. Late at night, people reported hearing eerie moaning and crying coming from the Johnsons' house, as if someone was weeping uncontrollably. Others claimed to have seen ghostly apparitions moving through the windows, their pale, translucent forms hovering in midair. Despite the rumors, some brave souls decided to investigate the haunted house, hoping to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences. But each one who dared to enter the house came back with a chilling tale of terror. One man claimed that he felt cold, bony fingers clutching at his neck as he walked through the darkened hallways. Another said that he saw a ghostly figure standing at the foot of Emily's bed, its eyes fixed on him with a look of malevolent hatred. As the stories of the haunted house spread, fewer and fewer people were willing to approach it. The Johnsons were left alone, surrounded by a sense of unease and dread that permeated the town. But then, one night, a group of teenagers dared each other to break into the Johnsons' house and see what lay inside. They crept through the darkened rooms, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. But as they entered Emily's room, something terrifying happened. The door slammed shut behind them, and they heard the sound of locks clicking into place. Panic set in as they realized that they were trapped, with no way out. And then, they heard something moving in the shadows, something that whispered Emily's name with a voice that was not of this world. The teenagers screamed and pounded on the door, but it was no use. They were trapped in the haunted house, with no escape from the horrors that awaited them. Chapter 4: The Possession. As the teenagers screamed and pounded on the door, they suddenly felt a cold wind blowing through the room. The air grew thick with the scent of decay and death, and a voice spoke to them from the shadows. It was Emily's voice, but it was different now. It was twisted and distorted, filled with a malevolent energy that chilled them to the bone. "I have come back," the voice said. "I have come back to claim what is mine." The teenagers huddled together in fear, their hearts racing as they realized that something evil had taken over Emily's body. They could feel its presence growing stronger, filling the room with a dark and oppressive energy. And then, something unimaginable happened. Emily's body began to contort and twist, her eyes rolling back into her head, as she let out a blood-curdling scream. The teenagers watched in horror as Emily's body lifted off the ground, levitating in midair as if held aloft by some invisible force. And then, with a final burst of energy, Emily's body burst into flames, engulfing the room in a fiery inferno. The teenagers ran for their lives, their screams echoing through the night, as they fled the haunted house. They could hear Emily's laughter ringing in their ears, a haunting reminder of the evil that lurked in the Johnsons' home. The next day, the town awoke to the news that the Johnsons' house had burned to the ground, leaving nothing but smoldering ruins. The townspeople whispered that it was the work of a vengeful spirit, the ghost of Emily Johnson seeking revenge on those who had wronged her. But for the few who had witnessed the possession of Emily's body, there was no doubt that something far more sinister had taken place. The evil that had claimed Emily's body was still out there, waiting to strike again. Chapter 5: The Curse. In the weeks that followed the destruction of the Johnsons' home, strange things continued to happen in the town. People reported seeing ghostly apparitions moving through the streets at night, their pale, translucent forms hovering in midair. The townspeople became increasingly superstitious, convinced that a curse had been unleashed upon them by the vengeful spirit of Emily Johnson. Some even claimed to have seen her ghostly form walking through the ruins of her former home, her eyes filled with a cold and unyielding hatred. And then, one night, a group of teenagers decided to perform a séance in the ruins of the Johnsons' home. They hoped to communicate with the spirit of Emily, to find out what she wanted and put her to rest once and for all. But as they chanted their incantations, something went horribly wrong. The ground began to shake, and the ruins of the house began to crumble around them. The teenagers screamed as they were buried alive in the rubble, their bodies crushed beneath the weight of the collapsing walls. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the shaking stopped. The ruins were silent once more, as if nothing had ever happened. But the townspeople knew better. They knew that the curse of Emily Johnson still lingered, waiting to claim its next victim. They knew that they could never truly escape the horror that had befallen their town. And so, they lived in fear, always looking over their shoulders, always watching for the next sign of the vengeful spirit that haunted their homes and their dreams. For the curse of Emily Johnson was one that could never be broken, a reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all.